Well, students, we are discussing iterative methods for linear systems. In this, we have covered Jacobi method in the last two lectures, and in this lecture, we will start our discussion on Gauss-Seidel method. Gauss-Seidel method is an improvisation of Jacobi method in the sense that it converges slightly faster than the Jacobi method. Otherwise, the basic idea involved in Gauss-Seidel method is just the same as the Jacobi method. Therefore, we will not get into the details of how to derive the Gauss-Seidel method because it is going to be almost the same as Jacobi method. Rather, we will try to explain the method in the case of a 3 by 3 system, and the general system idea will be exactly similar. Consider a 3 by 3 system of linear equations. As long as the diagonal elements are not equal to 0, you can always write this given system in this form. In the last class also we have seen this. Now, as we did in the Jacobi method, we will start with an initial guess, which we will denote by x0. And recall, in the Jacobi method, we plug in this on the right hand side of the system, x is equal to bx plus c, right? Where b is the matrix given by D inverse C, and small c is the vector given by D inverse B vector, which is the right hand side vector. If you write it in the component wise, in the case of 3 by 3 system, we get x1 of 1 is equal to 1 by a11 into b1 minus a12 x2 minus a13 x3, and x2 and x3 are replaced by the corresponding components of the initial guess. And this formula gives you the first component of your vector x1, right? X superscript 1. That was the idea coming from our Jacobi method. And how we computed the second component of the vector x1, that was using the formula 1 by a22 into b2 minus a21 x1 of 0 minus a23 x3 of 0, right? Now you see, when you are computing x2, you already computed x1, right? This is known to you. The Gauss-Seidel idea is, when you know x11, why you want to use x10, which is coming from your previous iteration, you just substitute this here. If it is so that x1 is going to be a better approximation to your solution, then it may be more advantageous to use this better information than using x10, right? That was the Gauss-Seidel idea. But of course, x30 is not known to us when you are computing x21. Therefore, this you will retain from your previous iteration. Rather, this alone you will replace by the corresponding value computed in the present iteration. Now, when you go to compute x3 of 1, in the Jacobi method, what we do, it was 1 by a33 into b3 minus a31 x1 of 0 minus a32 x2 of 0, right? Again, if you see, when you are computing x31, you already computed x11 and also x12. Therefore, you can as well replace the better information here instead of the old information. And similarly, this information you can plug in here and hope to get a better approximation to x31 when compared to what you obtained using Jacobi method when you use the previous iterations information. This is the idea behind Gauss-Seidel method. Let us now post the general formula for Gauss-Seidel method in the case of 3 by 3 system. Given xk vector, that is the kth iteration, you go to find the k plus 1th iteration. In that, the first component uses fully the information from your previous iteration. Once you obtain x1, then x1 will be plugged in the place of x1k on the right hand side while computing x2, whereas x3 at this time we don't know, therefore you will take the information from your previous iteration. But once you compute x1 and x2 at the k plus 1th iteration, then x3 will be fully computed with your k plus 1th information, that is x2 k will be replaced by x2 k plus 1, and similarly x1 k is replaced by x1 k plus 1, and thereby you just hope to get a better approximation. So that gives me x k plus 1. Okay, see, in the general case what we are doing, when you are writing x I k plus 1, it will be 1 by a I bi minus, now you have two part of the remaining summation. One is ranging from, say, j is equal to 1 to I minus 1. So all these terms are previously calculated in the present iteration itself. Therefore, you have aij xj of k plus 1 you will put, right? They all are finished already in the present iteration. And then j is equal to I plus 1, because I you will not compute, right? I was retained on the left hand side, therefore it won't come on the right hand side. So you have I plus 1 to n, and these terms, the components are yet to be computed as far as this iteration is concerned. Therefore, we will use the corresponding components coming from your previous iteration one. That's the key idea of Gauss-Seidel method. And this will happen for all the rows. That is all the equations. So that's the general formula for Gauss-Seidel method component wise. You can think how to write the corresponding B matrix in this case. And this is called the Gauss-Seidel iterative sequence. And this sequence now is called the Gauss-Seidel iterative sequence. And the method is called the Gauss-Seidel iteration method or Gauss-Seidel method. Now coming to the convergence theorem, well, Gauss-Seidel method also converges under the same condition as we had in the Jacobi method. The theorem says that if the coefficient matrix A, remember A x equal to B is what we are interested to solve, and this A is the coefficient matrix. See, generally students get confused with this form. See, this is also written in this form, Bx plus C, right? And we always want this B to be less than 1 in its norm. That is guaranteed when A is diagonally dominant. Okay, don't think when B is diagonally dominant, then the Gauss-Seidel method converges. This is what generally we get confused with, whether A should be diagonally dominant or B should be diagonally dominant. Remember, the coefficient matrix of your original system, that is A, diagonally dominant, implies this, and therefore implies the convergence. Whether it is Jacobi or Gauss-Seidel, this idea will be there. Let us prove this theorem. The idea behind proving this theorem is exactly the same as what we did with Jacobi method. Only thing is, now we have two terms in each component of xk plus 1. One is contributing to the past and another one contributing to the future when compared to the present component of your vector, that is I, right? When you are computing I, what you already computed are j equal to 1 to I minus 1, that you have to write separately, and what you are yet to compute or I plus 1 to n, that you have to write separately. Now you see in the Jacobi method, we had only one term, right? And we took this part, of course, divided by ai as our mu, right? Now you have to take similarly two parts, one half, let's say call as alpha, and the other part call as beta, right? And you have to deal with them separately. That's the only difference now in the present proof. Otherwise, all the other ideas are exactly same. You see, you can write each component of the error vector involved in the k plus 1th iteration as like this. Remember, the idea is again exactly the same as what we explained in Jacobi method. Therefore, I don't need to explain it here. Only thing is you just split that one summation into two parts. That is the only difference. Once you understand this difference, all the other steps goes similarly. Only at the conclusion, you have little more complication. As I told, you take the first term coefficient as alpha and the second term coefficient as beta. And this is for each I. Therefore, alpha I, beta I you are taking. Now you can see there is ambiguity when alpha 1, because alpha I goes from 1 to I minus 1. Therefore, alpha 1 will go from j equal to 1 to 0. Such a situation should not occur. Therefore, you explicitly put that as 0. And similarly here, you start from j equal to I plus 1 to n. When I is n, then you will be starting your j from n plus 1 and go up to n. That also should not happen. So such a situation, you manually put 0. Okay. With this nomenclature, you can take these notations for I is equal to 1 to n. Just to recall, in the case of Jacobi method, we had defined a similar coefficient as mu, and that was actually given by maximum of all such i's. Now what we will do, the same mu in our present case defined like this. So we will combine alpha I, which is coming from here, and beta I, which is coming from the future computation, right? And that is our mu for the present case. Okay, Gauss-Seidel. In the case of Gauss-Seidel, we are defining our mu like this, whereas this is in the Jacobi case. Both are same, but only thing is we are just now splitting them into alpha I and beta I. We are just giving notations for that because our terms are now separated like this. Otherwise, expression wise, it is same. And therefore, we don't need to put any effort to see that A is diagonally dominant if and only if mu is less than 1. Because expression wise, it is exactly same. Only this is rewritten like this in order to take care of our present situation in the Gauss-Seidel method. Otherwise, they both are same. Therefore, this result remains exactly same even for the mu that we have here, right? Now what we do, if you recall in the Jacobi method, we have taken modulus on both sides of the error component, right? Let's see how this is going to work in the present case. Well, in the Gauss-Seidel method, the error component in the k plus 1th iteration is given like this. When you take modulus on both sides and take the modulus inside, you have this is less than or equal to modulus of this into modulus of this into modulus of this. And this, if you recall, this is alpha I and this is beta I, right? Then if you recall, we replaced these two terms by the L infinity norm in the Jacobi case, but in the present case, it is slightly different because this you have to replace by the L infinity norm of the error vector ek plus 1, and this part you can replace by the L infinity norm of ek. Therefore, we get this inequality where you have modulus of ei k plus 1 is less than or equal to alpha I norm ek plus 1 plus beta I norm ek, right? And this holds for all I ranging from 1 to n, and it will therefore hold for that component at which this attains its maximum, right? Therefore, we can write this by this as well, and that leads to this inequality. Norm ek plus 1 is less than or equal to alpha. What is L? L is that component for which you get the maximum. That is, ek plus 1 infinity is by definition maximum over I is equal to 1 to n mod ei k plus 1, right? So maximum is achieved at some I ranging from 1 to n. Let us say it is achieved at L for some L lying between 1 and n. Okay, this inequality is true for that L also, because this inequality is true for all I ranging from 1 to n, and that L which is sitting in between this will also satisfy this inequality. Therefore, I will just put that L alone. Instead of writing this for all I will write for that L alone this inequality. Then how will it look like? It is alpha L into this as it is plus beta L into this as it is, and this side I have EL of k plus 1. But EL of k plus 1 is nothing but the maximum norm, because that is the maximum, right? Therefore, this side I will put ek plus 1 of this. Now you see, you bring this term to the right hand side and you can write this inequality in this form. Remember, I can do this because alpha L is surely less than 1. Why? Because mu, which is nothing but maximum over I of alpha I plus beta I. You see, something very big than alpha, right? That itself is less than 1. Therefore, each alpha i's will be less than 1. In particular, alpha L will also be less than 1. Therefore, this quantity is positive. So I can happily bring that quantity from the left hand side to right hand side without spoiling the inequality. That is the purpose. So we got this inequality. Now let us define a new parameter eta like this. Remember, this right hand side is exactly the same, but only thing is I'm taking mod maximum over all i's now. Therefore, eta will surely be greater than or equal to beta L by 1 minus alpha L, right? That is what I'm going to replace. Therefore, I can write this as less than or equal to eta times, because this is less than or equal to eta, times E k infinity, right? So that is what I'm going to do in the next step. I get E k plus 1 infinite norm is less than or equal to, I just replace this by eta now, and E k L infinity norm. So we got up to this. Now what we can do is our usual recursive application of the same inequality, and that will give us the result. That is what we can then write. This is less than or equal to eta square norm E k minus 1 infinity, and like that you keep on going. Eta k plus 1 norm E 0 L infinity norm, and this goes to 0 as k tends to infinity, and that will tell us that this goes to 0 as k tends to infinity. And this proves the theorem on Gauss-Seidel method. provided eta is less than 1. Now let us see how to prove that eta is less than 1. Alpha I plus beta I minus alpha I divided by beta I as greater than or equal to alpha I by 1 minus alpha I into 1 minus beta. So a simple calculation will tell you this, and that shows that eta is always less than or equal to mu. If you recall, in the Gauss-Seidel method, what we got is ek plus 1 infinity is less than or equal to eta times k plus 1 into E0 infinity, right? Whereas this is our Gauss-Seidel method, and Jacobi method, what we got is ek plus 1 infinity is less than or equal to mu times, mu is given above, k plus 1 into E of 0 infinity. Same, but mu here, and our this kind of expression gives us that you can see that taking maximum here is actually the mu, right? So eta is less than or equal to mu. That's what we are getting. Eta is always less than or equal to mu. So you can see that this will go slightly ahead to 0 than this. Okay, that is what we can observe because of this property. So this is always reflected in the computation that whenever both Gauss-Seidel and Jacobi method converges, then always Gauss-Seidel error will be slightly less than the Jacobi method's error. We always can observe it numerically. The reason behind that is because this eta, which is coming out of your calculations in the case of Gauss-Seidel method, is always less than or equal to mu. Sometimes they may be equal, but sometimes they are eta is small, and you will notice that the error in Gauss-Seidel method is less than the error in the Jacobi method at any iteration k. The two convergence theorems we proved so far are only sufficient conditions, that is, diagonally dominant coefficient matrix implies convergence of the iterative sequence from Gauss-Seidel and Jacobi, right? But we have not got the converse of it, that is, convergence implies what? See, diagonally dominant condition is not strong enough to give the converse. In fact, you can find examples in which there are non-diagonally dominant matrices, but still either Jacobi or Gauss-Seidel iterations may still converge. So we need a stronger condition to ensure if and only if condition, and that comes from the spectral radius. There is an exercise problem in our lecture notes, the problem number 26, and this problem is about the spectral radius. Let us try to understand this problem. First, let us try to see what is meant by spectral radius of a matrix. Spectral radius of a matrix A is defined by this formula, which is the maximum of modulus of the eigenvalues of the matrix, and it is denoted by rho A. Now, the second part of the problem is what is interesting for us. It says that if the coefficient matrix A is invertible, that is very important. If the coefficient matrix A is invertible, and if the iterative method is of this form, which we have both Jacobi and Gauss-Seidel, and if this iterative sequence converges, then you have the spectral radius of A is less than 1. And in fact, its converse is also true. That is, if the spectral radius is less than 1, it means the iterative sequence converges. So spectral radius less than 1 is a more stronger condition, and that can be seen in a sense from the part 1 of this problem also. The part 1 of the problem says that you take any subordinate matrix norm, apply it on a matrix, and its value will be surely greater than or equal to the spectral radius of the matrix. Let us only prove the necessary part, and the sufficient part will be omitted for our course. Let us see how to prove the second part of this problem. Assume that the iterative sequence of the form xk plus 1 is equal to b xk plus c converges, right? That is what we have to assume as k tends to infinity, of course. Then we have to prove that the spectral radius of the matrix B, okay, it's not the spectral radius of A, but it's the spectral radius of B is less than 1. That is what we want to prove. If the sequence converges, then the spectral radius is less than 1. The spectral radius of the iterative matrix. See, this is called the iterative matrix, or in the case of Jacobian method, it is Jacobi matrix. In the case of Gauss-Seidel method, it is called the Gauss-Seidel matrix. In general, if your iterative method is of this form, then B is called the iterative matrix. But assume the contrary, that the spectral radius of B is greater than or equal to 1. Now choose the initial guess x0 such that V is equal to x0 minus x star is an eigenvector corresponding to lambda j, the eigenvalue, where the spectral radius of B is precisely modulus of lambda j. It means this is the eigenvalue at which the maximum is attained at its modulus, okay, and x star is the exact solution of the system. It means Ax star is equal to B. You can always choose a vector such that x0 minus x star is your eigenvector corresponding to lambda j. Then what you can see is xk plus 1 minus x star. Remember, x star will also satisfy the same equation as what your xk plus 1 satisfies, right? Note that your x star will also satisfy this system. Again, I'll tell you why it is so, because this system and this system are one and the same. They are written in different way, that's all. Therefore, this can be written as B into xk minus x star, right? And now again recursively apply this equality. See, I'm not taking modulus and making things inequality, just equality. The same equality I will just apply to the right hand side vector, and that gives me b square into xk minus 1 minus x star. Like that, if you go on, you will finally have b k plus 1 into x0 minus x star, right? And recall, you have chosen your initial guess x0 in such a way, this is your eigenvalue v, right? Therefore, this is equal to b k plus 1 times v, and that is equal to lambda j k plus 1 times v, right? Now we have assumed that the spectral radius of B is greater than or equal to 1, which is nothing but mod lambda j, right? And that is greater than or equal to 1. That is what we have assumed. That implies that xk plus 1 will never converge to x star. Why? Because this will not converge to 0, right? Remember, B is a non-zero vector. You take now modulus on both sides and see this is equal to modulus of this into vectors, right? Every step you will have, like you put this, don't use that famous property because we just want to retain equality. Therefore, you just keep it like that and come, you will reach this with modulus, and that shows that your right hand side won't go to 0 because lambda j is greater than or equal to 1. Therefore, the left hand side will also not go to 0. Yeah, of course, without taking modulus also you can see that, because this is equality, right? So you don't need to in fact take the norm. That means the sequence xk does not converge. That is a contradiction, that your sequence is converging. Okay, so you assume that the sequence converges, then you have to prove that the spectral radius of the iterative matrix B is 1. What we did, we assumed the contrary, that B is greater than or equal to 1. Then what we did is, in particular, we have chosen an initial guess like this, so that x0 minus x star is eigenvector. Remember, once again, you go back and see the statement says that the sequence converges for every initial guess. Okay, even if it doesn't converge for one initial guess, you are contradicting your assumption, right? So what I'm doing is, I'm typically choosing one such initial guess and showing that in this case, the sequence is not converging. Okay, but we assume that the sequence converges for any initial guess, but we have produced one initial guess for which the sequence is not converging if your spectral radius is greater than or equal to 1. Therefore, we have arrived at a contradiction, and that shows that your spectral radius of the iterative matrix should be strictly less than 1 always, provided your sequence converges to the exact solution for any initial guess that you take. Okay, so that's a interesting result. In fact, the converse of this result is also true. That is, when the spectral radius of the matrix B is less than 1, then the corresponding iterative sequence will surely converge to the solution of Ax equal to B for any initial guess that you take. But we will omit that part of the proof. But this result is very important. You have to keep this result in mind.